Curiosity drifted through the cold morning air the moment Eliza May Carter stepped off the stagecoach, as if the mountains themselves tilted their ancient heads to study the small, trembling figure daring to enter their dominion. She paused on the wooden platform, clutching her worn satchel close, her breath turning to pale ghosts that fled into the frost-bitten sky. Her boots, far too thin for the season, tapped softly against the planks, small sounds swallowed by snow and silence. Anyone watching might have thought she hesitated from the cold, but the truth ran deeper. She feared stepping onto soil where she already expected to be unwanted. She had crossed half a continent to answer an advertisement written in a hand both steady and spare. A man of 34 seeks a bride of gentle nature. Must wish for peace more than propriety. The letter had been signed by Silas Rowan, a mountain man whose quiet words had stirred something like bravery inside her. But letters could lie. People often loved the idea of her, pretty, quiet, desperate, and then recoiled when they sensed the fractures beneath her calm surface. 3 proposals had crumbled before she even reached this territory. Each rejection had carved her thinner, softer, easier to bruise. Even now she felt carved hollow, like a sugar sculpture left too close to the hearth. The town, small as a cup spilled across the valley floor, offered little refuge. Windows fogged by warmth revealed silhouettes moving inside, but none stepped out to greet her. The wind tugged at her shawl like a bored child. A dog barked somewhere behind the stables, then fell silent, as if even it lost interest. Eliza forced herself forward, the weight of her own history pressing heavier than her satchel. She reminded herself that she was here to start anew. That she had one final chance at choosing a life not handed to her, if Silas Rowan wished to accept her. Inside the inn, warmth hit her like a living breath. Fire cracked in the stone hearth, its glow brushing her cheeks with false courage. A few travelers occupied the small room, but their glances were swift, assessing, dismissive. She recognized the look, people measuring her against whatever story they had already decided to believe. She folded her hands to stop their trembling. Martha Doolin, the innkeeper, strode from behind the counter, apron dusted with flour and expression sharp enough to slice open a secret. "You're the mail-order girl, aren't you?" Martha asked, voice carrying to every ear in the room. Eliza felt her spine stiffen, but she nodded. "Pretty thing like you might last a day up in those mountains," Martha muttered, not unkindly, but full of doubt. "Silas Rowan isn't one for chatter. Or company." Eliza thanked her softly, though shame flared bright beneath her ribs. The room seemed to tilt with whispered opinions, each one adding weight to the sinking knowledge that she might already be a disappointment. She had just sat down when the door swung open, letting in a gust of winter. The man who stepped through did not belong to the chatter or the warmth. He looked sculpted from the very mountains behind him. Broad-shouldered beneath a wool coat, dark hair dusted with snow, and eyes the color of river stone after rain. Steady, unbroken, quietly searching. Silas Rowan removed his hat with a slow grace, and when his gaze settled on Eliza, something patient passed through it, like recognition without certainty. He approached her table without urgency, each step measured as if he feared startling her. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice a low timbre shaped by solitude more than shyness. She rose instinctively, though she wished her knees wouldn't betray her so easily. "Yes, Mr. Rowan," she whispered. He studied her, not with the ownership she'd endured before, nor with the suspicion she'd braced for, but with a thoughtful calm that made her pulse falter. "You must be cold from your travels," he said. "The road from the station's rough this time of winter." His concern felt like a small gift, unexpected and almost too gentle to bear. "I'm fine," she answered, then immediately regretted the lie when her teeth began to chatter. Silas's brow shifted in subtle understanding. Without touching her, he stepped aside to clear a path, silently asking if she wished to leave the crowded room. She followed him out of the inn, aware of the whispers crawling behind them. The town's eyes lingered on her with a familiar blend of pity and skepticism. Each glance pressed against her like a reminder that she had been fragile once, and fragile things were often abandoned. Outside, the snow had softened into a quiet drift, the flakes falling large and lazy. Silas offered his arm but kept enough distance to give her the choice. She hesitated, not from uncertainty of him, but from the foreignness of being allowed to choose at all. Slowly, she rested her hand on his sleeve. It felt solid, warm through the wool, grounding. As they walked toward the waiting wagon, Eliza tried to steady her breath. "You live far from town?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "A ways up the ridge," Silas replied. "Not too far if the weather's fair. Longer if the mountain decides otherwise." His tone carried no complaint, only respect for the land that shaped him. "It's quieter there," he added after a moment. "Peaceful. I thought perhaps peace was what you wanted." Her steps slowed. No one had ever spoken to her desires, only their own. "I do," she said. And she meant it. Peace felt like a distant dream, one she feared to reach for too boldly. Silas halted near the wagon and turned to her fully. Snow gathered along his shoulders like a mantle. "I'm not a man of many words, Miss Carter," he said. "But I keep the ones I give. If we choose this path, I want it to be one we walk together, not one you're pushed into." Her breath caught. No suitor had ever spoken of walking with her. Only taking her. Or needing her. Or fixing her. "I didn't come to be a burden," she murmured, the old shame rising uninvited. Silas shook his head, a small, deliberate motion. "A burden is something carried without choice. You are someone invited." The words struck deeper than he likely intended. She felt something inside her, tight for years, begin to ease, as if his quiet steadiness reached places untouched by gentler voices. But fear lingered still, coiling inside her like a startled bird. This man seemed too kind, too patient. And kindness, she'd learned, often vanished once her fractures appeared. Still, she climbed into the wagon, choosing the unknown over the life she fled. Silas guided the horses forward, the wheels crunching over fresh snow. Behind them, the town shrank into a handful of lights, each one flickering like a memory closing its eyes. Eliza drew her shawl tighter, letting silence settle comfortably between them. Curiosity, soft, cautious, blooming, rose inside her as the mountain path stretched ahead. She didn't know what waited at its end, but for the first time in months, she felt the faint, stubborn spark of something almost like hope. And the mountain, vast and listening, seemed to welcome the promise of her arrival. Snow drifted in soft spirals across the valley as the young mail-order bride stepped down from the wagon, her boots sinking into the pale powder. At 27, she carried herself with quiet grace, though her eyes held the tired shadows of someone who had spent far too long believing she was unwanted. The journey had scraped her strength thin, yet something inside her still glowed gently, a fragile ember refusing to die. She wrapped her arms around herself, not for the cold but for reassurance, as she looked toward the solitary cabin where her future waited. The mountain man stood on the porch, his broad shoulders outlined against the steaming breath of his horses. At 34, he was the sort of man who seemed carved rather than born, strong jaw, thick beard, and steady eyes that missed nothing. Wealth had come to him over the years through land, horses, and relentless toil, but none of it had softened his solitude. He wore it like a second coat. Until the moment he saw her step off the wagon, he had believed solitude was enough. He moved slowly down the steps, not wanting to startle her. She looked smaller than he had imagined from her letters, though prettier too, with a quiet, helpless vulnerability that tugged at him in a way he hadn't expected. He had asked for companionship, someone to share the silence of winter nights, but as he drew closer, something shifted inside him, unexpected and unsettling. He hoped she would not see it in his face. She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was a gentleness in his expression that surprised her, a softness beneath the rugged frame. She had braced herself for indifference or disappointment, the kind she had known too well from others, but not this quiet warmth. It unsettled her just enough to make her step back, instinctively, before catching herself and offering a small, timid smile. "I'm glad you made it safe," he said, his voice a deep rumble shaped by years of mountain wind. "The storm's settling heavier up the ridge. We should get you inside before it worsens." She nodded, clutching her small bag. "Thank you. I didn't think the snow would be this strong." "It's harsh up here," he replied gently. "But you'll be warm." He reached for her bag, brushing her fingers as he took it. His touch was warm, unexpectedly so, and she felt a quick flutter in her chest. She followed him toward the cabin, each step crunching in the fresh snow. The air carried the sharp scent of pine and the faint sweetness of smoke drifting from his chimney. Everything around her felt colder, wider, and wilder than the life she had left behind. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, filling the room with a heat that wrapped around her like a blanket. The space was tidy, surprisingly so for a man living alone, wood stacked neatly, shelves lined with jars he clearly preserved himself, and blankets folded with care. She could sense how much of his life here had been shaped by discipline rather than comfort. He had built this place board by board. She could feel it in the air. He set her bag near the bed tucked in the corner. "I wasn't sure what you'd need," he said, sounding hesitant for the first time. "But I hope it's enough until we sort things out together." "It's more than enough," she said softly. And she meant it. She had never owned much, never been offered much, and certainly never been welcomed into a place that looked prepared just for her. He paused, his gaze searching her expression as if trying to read what she wasn't saying. "You don't need to pretend you're comfortable. It's a lot, coming all the way out here." "I'm nervous," she admitted quietly. "But I'm willing." Her honesty struck him with unexpected force. Nervous, yet willing. He knew those words better than she realized. He had lived most of his life that way, stepping into the unknown, hoping for something better than what he'd left behind. He gestured toward the table where a pot of stew simmered. "Sit. You should eat." She hesitated only a moment before taking the chair nearest the fire. He ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her, his movements careful, almost shy. She took the spoon, grateful for something warm in her hands. The first bite surprised her with its tenderness, far richer than anything she had eaten in weeks. He watched her reaction with quiet curiosity, and when she smiled, even faintly, something eased in his shoulders. "You cook well," she said. "I try," he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't want you arriving hungry." She looked up. "You thought of that?" His eyes softened. "I've been thinking of everything that might make this easier for you." Her breath caught, not fear, but something quieter, something she had never been offered before, consideration. Outside, the wind began to howl, pushing drifts against the window. The storm he had warned her about had arrived. Yet inside, the warmth between them grew subtly, quietly, like the first glow beneath embers. "You'll be safe here," he said, voice low, steady. "That's a promise." She held his gaze, feeling something unfold gently inside her chest. For the first time in years, she believed someone might actually keep a promise made to her. The storm raged on, but the cabin, small, warm, and glowing, felt like a beginning neither of them had expected, yet both silently hoped would grow into something more.